We should start with that.
So my main takeaways from this week's section are more skulls, herbalism, and mild necromancy, question mark.
Amazing.
So I don't know if that means I'm understanding things now or if I'm just like picking out little pieces, if this is more reflective of me than of the book.
I don't
Yeah.
even recognize
Am
where
I
that part is. So you're
am
doing
I
you're
am
doing
I
great.
se am I secretly just a goth girl? Is this what's happening?
I never doubt it. I never doubt it.
Welcome to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter at the University of Rochester. And on this podcast, we take a giant book or more than one, break it down section by section, talk about it, analyze it, have jokes, talk about skulls and necromancy, apparently. This season, we are doing I the Supreme by Augusto Roa Bastos. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books. The person you heard at the top of this is Kaija Straumanis, editorial director at Coffee House Press. How are you doing, Kaija?
I may be a little dark and twisty, Chad. How are you?
Fine. I'm okay. I'm doing great. And we have a special guest this week, Carlos Labbé, who is the author of many books, but four of which have been published by Open Letter: Navidad and Matanza, La Cuela, Spiritual Choreographies, and The Murmuration. Carlos, welcome. We need you. How are you doing?
Hola, hola. I'm great. Yeah, it's April 1st. The weather is beautiful and it's April Fools.
It is
So it's
April
perfect.
Fools.
Yep.
April Fools is kind of the best day in which to talk about this book.
I missed my chance. I should have opened it up by saying, I finally understand everything.
Or or
And then
or,
I would have gone, "Pew, pew, pew,
or
pew, April Fools."
guess which president died today.
Oh, such a
It's
tease.
That
such a
would be
long list.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I
It's a
haven't checked the
longer
news.
list
It
than
could
it
be
should be.
anyone.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's a longer wish list than it should be.
Any of those would be good.
Any of those are possible. So, so Carlos, so I mean, we can jump right into this. I don't have a lot of banter. There's a lot of crap going on in the world. I'm trying to stop looking at the news like I've been doing for so long. It's just depressing. Everything is 2003 all over again. So let's put that aside. Let's forget about it. Let's move on.
All
Carlos,
right.
this is a book that you texted me about almost immediately after we started this season, the 2 month review, asking why we were looking into to Paraguay's
All right.
history.
That was the question I need to ask you again.
Okay.
Why are you reading this Paraguayan masterpiece from the 70s that is partly in Spanish, partly in Guarani? Uh, why are you doing this?
It's
That's the
like,
new byline for 2 month review, open quote. Why are you doing
why are
this?
you doing this? I so okay, so there's a few reasons. I mean, there's the actual practical personal reasons. I've never read this and I've always wanted to. Like it's a book that I love Mario Vargas Llosa's big books like Conversations at the Cathedral. I love like Carlos Fuentes, Where the Air is Clear, and Terra Nostra. News of the Empire by Fernando del Paso. Those kind of that era and that, I mean, News of the Empire's later, but whatever. But that era, the Hopscotch and Cortázar. I've never read Jose Donoso's Obscene Bird of Night, but that's on my list too. That era of Latin American writing writ large, like as broadly as you want to make it, Spanish writing from South of America, I really, really, really like. And I find it very interesting. But this book I had never read. And I think part of it was that it's big. It's got a lot of words in it. It always has sat on my shelf and been like, well, when I get time, when I get time, when I get time, and I just never have. So this is an occasion to do that. But also we had started down this road of dictator books, of books about fascism, I guess. We had done Vineland by Thomas Pynchon, obviously about like of the Reagan years and all that kind of stuff. Shouts to One Battle After Another, I guess, for winning the Oscar, although I do not think it was the best movie of the year. I would give that to Eddington, but nobody's going to agree with me on that probably either. Anyways,
Oh,
but
Sinners.
we did that.
Sinners it is. Yeah.
Which one?
Okay. Sinners. I'll be very plain and mainstream. Sinners is the one.
Which I have not seen, which I started and I fell asleep. I fell asleep. It was like 1:30 in the morning,
Oh, you
and I was
should.
like woke up and it was over, and I was like,
Try
gotta
again.
start this. But
It's a big
such is life. But Sinners also, that would have been great. That would have been great. Either way, we did Pynchon, we did Vineland, and then we did William Gass's The Tunnel, which is also about fascism. So round that out with a little triptych of like fascist books. This one's a dictator. So we got to
Golden
go back.
Notebook.
Which, oh, Golden Notebook also, but that
Oh
was,
yeah, very
did that
good.
lead into it or was that separated? I can't remember.
We did Golden Notebook. Oh, we also did Kathy Acker in between. I was just making an effort to name one of the female authors we've read also.
Oh, yeah, yes. And we have done, and up next is another book that I don't think involves fascism, but is by a female
We,
author.
we don't really know.
We don't
It
know.
might.
It could. It might all be. Isn't everything fascism? It's all fascism and grifts everywhere you look.
Yeah.
I've been talking about fascism a lot because we read Volodine for my class this week, and so Anton Volodine's The Monroe Girls is about fascism, but also like most of his book, but also revolution, which I hope we change into.
That's a
We
new
need to
one,
get
right?
the revolutionaries.
Yeah.
But this was fit into that scheme. So I knew it was a dictator. I knew it was like a very prominent book from that era, something that I really wish that I had read, 20 years ago, but just never took the time. So I thought we would do it here. And I think we've had, I don't know, mixed results. I enjoy a good part of this book. I think it's very funny when I can lock into it. I find it very, very funny. I also find it very difficult to read in bits and fits and starts throughout like the week because you have to get into the zone of knowing who's speaking on what level and where you are because it is just like so many documents and things thrown together that you have to pay a lot of attention and it's been a period in time in which paying attention has been at a premium to just like get into a world where you're like, yeah, it's cool that you're torturing people in their hands in the basement. That's cool. That's funny. Meanwhile, Iran's being bombed. So like, I'm not sure it's in the right space for it. And I think Kaija, you have a much more negative reaction or.
No, I think you mentioned that the other night that, in passing, you're like, I know that you don't like this book, and I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm starting to Kai it. I would not say that's accurate. What I don't like is that I'm not retaining any information while reading this book other than, the things I mentioned up top at the episode. Um, I don't like that I don't seem to be having a reading experience that I would have wanted for myself, and I don't think that the book is at fault. Um, I like what you're saying right now about everything that's going on in the world is it's making it difficult at times to possibly consume this type of comment or content. And I do find times and places where it's like the perfect combination of like white noise and the chair I'm sitting in where everything sort of falls into place. And like I get through like 10, 20 lines and I feel great. And then something disrupts that and I'm just gone. I'm out of that moment. I I do think I enjoy the writing. I do think I enjoy the voice very much. I think it has kind of a Don Quixote register to it at times, which is, I mean, that's a book I enjoyed very, very much. But yeah, I
Which book?
just
What book is
got
that? Never heard
it's
of it.
written by a guy named I think Cervantes, and
Is that the one where he chases windmills?
it might be Italian.
Might be Italian. Yeah.
This we're
Anyways,
just we're rage baiting right now.
yeah,
Um,
just straight up.
Straight rage baiting.
Right.
So yeah, I do think I like the writing, I like the voice, but I am not having the experience I would have wanted for myself, and that I don't like. And I'm still in a place where I'm not sure how to correct that or how to reposition or re-navigate that.
Can I
One
say
other,
something about that? This book is from, I would say, from the middle part of the boom of the Latin American boom in the
yeah,
70s, when all these writers were in this phase of uh, applying a lot of Brechtian like distancing
yeah,
technique. So this book is huge, but at the same time, it's not immersive. I mean, it's
right.
intentionally always putting the reader like hey, this is not for you to have fun because it's the recount of a dictator.
Yeah,
In that way, it's very correct and at the same time very intentional. I don't want you to like this authoritarian figure's voice.
Hmm.
So it's not at all seductive. It's not never see that. I was like reading these pages, Chad, you sent me,
Yeah.
and intentionally he puts a lot of voices and materials from the 19th century, from the notebook of Francia, of the dictator. And when you read at that from like out of context, and not the context, but it's talking about indigenous people and women in a very, I don't know, old museum-like way. This only page, only this page. So it could be very disruptive, but at the same time, we live in a world right now that these things are reclaimed by these fascists.
Yeah, it is scary when there are parts in like with every book that we've done of these three that fit in the fascist sort of trilogy. There are so many moments that it's like, oh, well, that's happening today, or oh, that like
Right.
reflects on today's thing. And in this section, there's like the tariffs, like the way that Paraguay is going to exist is tariffs, and it's just like,
Right.
oh my
They
god,
used
what?
to use it.
Yeah,
That's why they're using that again. It's like a
yeah.
manual.
And it's a part of isolationism. Like all of it does ring true still. Although I think that like with the tunnel, well, with the Pynchon book with Vineland, that's very, a very clear like you should be a revolutionary. Like this, do not stand for like this surveillance state Reaganomic bullshit.
Right.
The Gas book is more complex in which it's like examine your own fascism. Examine the fact that you have tendencies that you should not be proud of and you need to check. And then this is like there's some insane fucking people who take over the world. I don't know. I don't know if there's any, I don't know what to do with it, but it's like, yeah, there are nutty dictators.
But at the same time, you have to consider that this book was written while in Paraguay there was a huge dictator, just like this one, like this 19th century dictator, but in the 60s, and it was like a revival.
Yeah.
So it's like somebody, I don't know, in the United States there is no like tradition of we can go there like big. Well, everything is more nuanced. Like
Yeah.
we're gonna try to do something, but let's not talk about that. And it's not like we are gonna do it and be proud. Right now, it's happening, but we're gonna be proud of saying it, and everybody else is our enemy. Part of the why United States became the country is now is because it started with this idea of freedom and everything was pink, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Melting
But
pot.
exactly, melting point. But right, everybody is welcome, nation of immigrants.
We can
Hmm.
all make
Bullshit
it.
now. Right,
It's
Yeah.
totally not true at all. Yeah.
exactly. But this, when you think that Yo el Supremo, I the Supreme is like the Bible of Paraguayan literature, is because those guys from the beginning had this discourse of being authoritarian and seeing the other, like the indigenous people or women for this like
Yeah.
founders uh, in the nose from the beginning.
I think it seems more, and this is the one of the maybe a question I wanted to start with for you is that you've read the book obviously in Spanish, and you mentioned when we were talking about it that it was a big deal within that sphere, and when you were studying and reading books like this book is a big deal within that, and you had more of a obviously for obvious reasons have more of a nuanced understanding of the history both in the moment when you were reading it in the moment it was written and like the preceding history which we're all kind of cut off from, which is one other reason to read this book is that like I don't know that many people that know that many Paraguayan authors or have read that many Paraguayan books. You had mentioned one that I had never heard of, but there's only like a handful at most in the database right now from 2008 onwards. Small sample size, but at the same time, like it's an area of Spanish writing that is obscured to some degree. So this would be at least a way to bring it up. And this was reprinted just 6 years ago. So it's like kind of fresh or coming back in a way. But in terms of the the sort of politics on it, one of the things that stood out in here is that part of his Francia's ideas about the country seemed to me to be more to respect the Guarani than you would expect. Like I would think like you repress a lot of like anyone who's other, repress them and create power out of that repression. And in this case, he seems to frequently stand up for that and like let that culture flourish. Don't
Yeah.
invade us because you're gonna make us all porteños, and we don't want to be that. We want to be our own thing. So you need to stay away, which is an interesting shift because it puts it back into that little inches towards the ambiguous nature where you're like, yeah, he's a dictator, but he's standing up for the right people a little
Right.
But
bit.
he's
I mean,
like,
he gets pissed about the joke that they make about the women, about Paraguayan women. He gets pissed and is like, I'm going to torture that son of a bitch for that.
Because
Like,
because they are Paraguayan,
yeah, because they're
not
Paraguayan,
because they are women.
not because they're
Women,
women.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that makes me real quick that, and how much of that is earnest concern for the state of Paraguay, and how much of it is a manipulation tactic, of like, oh, I'm doing it to like, no, this is all for the Guarani and for people of Paraguay versus it's for them, but really,
It's confusing, because this is a master politician, Francia. How long he was in power? Like 50 years
20,
or
I
so?
think it's only 26
Oh, okay, okay.
from
But
19 or 1814 to 1840 when he dies.
yeah, there was something about 25 in there.
still is a lot. It still is a lot, but but basically, this at the beginning of the countries in Latin America where the major influence, like foreign influence, was Spain. So in some way, he wanted to create a national identity, using the Guarani and indigenous like past. In Mexico, they were doing something like parallel, not similar, but they were saying, for instance, Mexico is the mix, the perfect mix between Europe and indigenous Aztecs. Not only Aztecs, no more. So they said that we are the perfect mix. But in Paraguay, they said like we are not Spaniards, we are not Argentinian, we are not Brazilian, because those were the three big enemies. The only thing we have here is fields like agriculture and indigenous past.
Yeah.
So that's the project. Um, they needed something, right?
I have so the what I didn't get around to asking in that question is how did you first encounter this book and how much of like Latin American history is beneficial to know when approaching this? Because we talked about like what is this like all these countries are becoming countries around the same point in time. This
Yeah.
the Spain gets rebuffed, everyone starts creating their own country or units of government, each one of them doing it slightly differently, but a lot of overlap. Like you had mentioned I'm hoping not mispronounce it, but Creole,
Yeah. Creole,
Creole,
Creole.
Creole.
Um, yeah, it's like French, right? I think. Well, this is a 70s view of the beginning of these republics. And so so it's a revision in some way. And I read it in the 90s when I
Okay.
was studying my literature bachelor's, I would say, like
Wow.
licenciatura en literatura. And it was part of the needed, like the canon, Latin
Hmm.
American canon. So it was part of I don't know, Cien Años de Soledad, 100 Years of
Yeah,
Solitude, and these were in the same curriculum.
that makes sense.
Uh, and for us was super easy to understand because in the 90s Chile was coming from a dictatorship too,
Yeah.
but we didn't have to study any history.
Right. Okay.
And in some way, for instance, about the same years, I was reading Joyce's Ulysses,
Hmm. Hmm.
trying to read it in English, but then I read it in Spanish. It's crazy in a weird Spaniard translation. And in some way, you don't when you try to read Ulysses or any like modernist masterpiece, let's say The Waves by Virginia Woolf,
Yeah.
right? It's nobody goes to understand first what was happening in Ireland,
Yeah.
unless it's or in England, right? Unless it's a very like well-prepared reader. Maybe might be, but you just go and confront the genius
Yeah.
of Joyce, right? Or the genius of Woolf. So in the 90s in Chile and in Latin America, Roa Bastos, it was like a genius.
Yeah.
So nobody wanted, like, of course, if you wanted to know some things about, but the way we read that back in the 90s, it was a different way that people read now in the university, I mean. It was like, here, you have this perfect masterpiece and deal with that. And in some ways, it's similar to the way you are reading now. It's like, uh, this is a strange object. Try to grasp something, but we all agree that it's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you, when you say like you read different in the 90s than do now at the university, what do you think of? What do you mean by that? What are you thinking of? I'm curious if you can expand on it.
I
If
think
not, I
right now it's changing. Right, like this year, right? From last year.
yeah.
But I think the process of contextualizing literature in the like two past decades make a lot of like what what the I don't know what they call it now, like correct
I like
politically
identity
correctness.
politics or political
Yeah,
correctness.
or
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's great because you come to read a book with a preparation,
Mhm.
but at the same time it's hard to get into the book. Um, and it's a big I don't know, we can debate about that. And at the same time, for instance, in my like night table, I try to apply that like I have three women, three men, so I have to have three women. I have one European. I have to have an African writer. Things like that. It's because we are. I think we are post globalism
Yeah.
right now. So we know we cannot pretend that we don't know, right? We
Yes.
cannot pretend that we don't know the mess that happened in the world, and now everything is a mess, and it's gonna be worse and worse. So in some way, I think the way we read right now is trying to correct the world, and at the same time try to keep some joy. As Kaija was saying, like we need to have some enjoyment I try to do that in my books, like a balance
Yes.
between craziness, joy, and also some political analysis. Um, yeah.
And I don't know that the mixture probably goes as far as you want, but there's a little bits of that in here. Yes, Kaya?
I have a question for you, Carlos, sort of based off of that, but going back. So you said that so Chile also had a dictator,
Yeah.
right? Or was around the same time also, yeah?
This book, yes, same 70s, all the
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
70s
70s.
was there.
So in reading Rua Bastos in Chile, when you read it, how did that feel knowing Chile's history? Did it feel like a camaraderie? Did it feel like whoa, like that guy's way worse than our guy was? Like what was that experience
Yeah.
like?
You know, always comparing this book with the Pinochet dictatorship, or later the La Fiesta del Chivo, the Vargas Llosa, what's the title in English? The feast, the feast of I don't know. The
I can't think of what it
is
is.
the novel that Vargas Llosa wrote about Trujillo, the Dominican Republic dictator. That is like also like a 500 size book. In
Yeah.
Chile, you know, the interesting thing about Chile, Chile always wanted or wants to be different than the rest of Latin America in a way, like we thinking about itself as a colder, more rational, and more um, poor at the same time than any of our neighbors. So basically, in Chile, nobody wants to be Caribbean. Still, nobody and everybody knows we are not Argentinian or Brazilian because we are not so rich in that way, like so complex. Well, we are complex, but we don't have that like amount of resources and the melting point pot So Chile basically was always like, we are so, we don't have anything. We have the four seasons. We are cold. So the only way to like grasp to something is like we can be rational. And something that Chile always wants to see itself is like we are Swiss, like the Switzerland. We can be neutral. We can be like, nobody can come. Nobody wants to come. So let us be happy alone, and a little tricky, right? So in Chile, nobody wanted to write the big novel of the dictatorship, and in the 80s and the 90s was a big controversy because some new generations wanted to write the big dictatorship
Yeah.
novel, and at the same time, the big writers of the 80s, like the Amela Eltit,
Yep.
she wanted to keep the dictatorship intentionally out of the grandness of
Mhm.
literature. Like let's pretend that, let's not have those guys. Let's not let. So basically, the freedom was literature. Let's not spend our time reading and writing about the minds of these totalitarians.
Mm.
Um, but Donoso did it, the big, and it was not the obscene Bird of the Night. It was
Yeah.
another one called Casa de Campo. I don't know, in English it's like country house, or
Yeah, it's is it just the house in the country?
something like that. And it's a parable. It's like it's a 500 page novel, and it's very smart the way it talks about dictatorship and how authoritarianism became something in Chile. And yeah, but it's not fascinated by the dictatorship.
That is really interesting. One of an author you must know Ariel Dorfman. Ariel
Yeah,
Dorfman sort of writes about the beginning of the dictatorship and the dictatorship to some degree because he was part of Allende's
right.
group when like the coup takes over, or coup takes place. It's interesting when you ask that question too, Kaya, because one of the things that occurs to me is that with the Chilean dictatorship that we're talking about in the 1970s, which is running parallel to the Paraguayan one and to Argentina situation, obviously, um, and to when the Supreme is being written, that's like that. That's one in which the U.S. has a huge influence. And like what's interesting about reading about Francia is like it's not there. Like though it is really just concerned with the surrounding countries and Spain and Portugal. But Spain and Portugal are also like working through proxies that are kind of jokes within this book. They're not really taken seriously, or they are, but they're not. They're like, whatever, man. You're just like you're a stooge. And that sort of level of like global catastrophe that comes from having these coups and supporting these coups and overthrowing governments over and over and over again from the US, this has less of that. Like the economics of it are different. Where like I can envision, I know things end tragically with the is it you refer to as like the three countries war,
Yeah.
the war that's going to take place like 30 years after Francia dies is going to just destroy everything. Like that's horrible and that is no good. But at this point in time, it's so much less that. Like they're trying to instill like there's in this section that we read for today up to page 269 just to throw that out there for anyone. There is like the bit where they're signing off on essentially independence. But everyone's declared their independence. Everyone's trying to declare their independence and they're trying to get both I might have this wrong, but they need like the Spanish representative, the Argentine or Porteño representative, and then the Brazilian Portuguese representative to sign off on this agreement. And one of the conversations that they're having that's at the crux of this is that Argentina wants Paraguay to be like an ally that's essentially like, we're one, we're together on this.
Yeah.
And Paraguay is very specifically, like Francia is very specifically saying, no, 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 we'll be friends with you, but we're our own thing. That is different. So like the forces that are trying to like create this government are very different set than they were in the 70s and even today. Like there's a different sort of pressures that are at play there. And related to what you were saying at the beginning, Kai, about the like in the book, there was in reading this section, there was a moment where I was like, this is actually very linear and more so than I thought it was. And it does have like a plot through it, in that we're more or less following the years of 1810 onwards chronologically. Like we leave off, they're throwing in here amid like other madness and other bits. But if you just focus on those historical bits, I think they're all going in order. And they are like showing Francia try and weave his way through these varying competing interests and try and make Paraguay Paraguay. And what we haven't got exactly is we're getting that part. And then we also get like closer to the end of his life where he's like dying and he sees the crazy priest, I think, or the shaman, and like has that experience in here. I think that's close. I don't know if that's when he's dying, falls off his horse. I got very confused by that section. Forget what I'm saying. But we get a lot more of like he's talking to Patino. There's
Right.
the Pasquinade that shows up. It's his end of his life. And in between, we get some of these like compilers notes where it's like, here's someone who did really visit Paraguay. Here's what they wrote. Here's the naturalist who's trying to get to Paraguay to get all of these plants and that. And Francie is like sending him up to live in isolation off wherever. There's like those kind of bits to it. That's that middle section. But 1820 is when there's like I believe an attempted assassination of Francia or overthrow of him. And it's at that moment that this switches from like, I want Paraguay to be its own nation to like, this is a police state and you're under
Yeah.
complete surveillance. And we haven't gotten to that yet. And I wondered if like the book would, I don't know how the balance of this will work, but if that's part of what we're following as a thread is like, how do you establish this country? And then how do you become this version of a dictator? Because right now he still seems like maybe not a
Yeah.
good guy, but I'm on his side still. I don't want the Argentines taking over this country. I don't
No.
want the Brazilians taking over this country. I want them to be able to do their own thing.
And the guy was a very illustrated guy. He wrote his own biography, memoir. Francia was very well educated, and
Yeah.
it was part of this trend of like Bolivar, San Martin,
Oh yeah.
O'Higgins, all of those like founding fathers, the same as Washington, right?
Hmm.
They were very well versed, and they had an idea like they were like utopist, like let's
Yeah.
build the perfect, and they were from very rich families.
Mhm.
Basically they were the 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 kids, the one who has inherited a big farm. So
Right.
Paraguay, in some way, was a big farm. All these countries, all our countries, were with big farms, and the Spaniards were gone. So
Hmm.
what should we do?
Yeah.
And still, when in Latin America, people talk about ways to imagine countries, they say like the Paraguay solution was to close frontiers,
Right.
borders. Let's was an experiment. Like let's close borders for 30 years and try to. Um, Argentina tried to do that at the beginning of the 2000s because the crisis.
Yeah.
Let's close everything. Let's stop being globalized people and try to do something for ourselves.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the novel is like it's not and it's not a Paraguayan language talking to a Paraguayan about a Paraguayan problem. It's a very globalized 70s boom Spaniard, without Carmen Balcells, the agent of
Yeah.
Vargas Llosa, Garcia Marquez, and all of those. I think this book would never pass an editorial process.
Yeah.
Imagine you guys being editors and publishers of this. Saying like this, no, this section has to go. What's the focus on this? Or what are you talking about? What are you trying to do? Like these guys were so privileged in these writers. I'm talking about the
Yeah.
boom writers.
Yeah.
So privileged that everything they did with care and
Hmm.
mastership, but at the same time, everything they did was published, and
Yep.
not even, and also they sold a lot.
Yeah.
So it was a dream for them.
Yeah.
That's why they started doing this. Like, okay, if anything I do is great. So I'm gonna talk about the history of my country.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And this is the first book of his that gets, wait, I forget now. Maybe the second one, but I think it's the
Second,
first one that
yeah.
gets translated. And then Son of Man
Oh,
is right afterwards or something. And then the third one, the prosecutor is much, much later. But like,
mhm.
but there is, you're right. Like it is a moment, like a sweet spot where like these experimentally leaning Latin American authors were able to do something that was unique, get it published, and have success. That and it's interesting, like maybe from a they created a market, and from a publishing perspective, I think that the publishers tried to milk that market too much. Like they started looking for only people who are replicating those authors instead of following the trend of what's the next experiment. So instead of DML LT, you get Isabel Allende.
Right.
And like they privilege the authors that are repeating something. And anytime you start repeating things like that, it becomes sort of derivative and a little bit less edgy because you've already seen it. Whereas DMLLT, which we did cover on here way back when, is way more pushing the limits, way more in that Kathy Acker
But
vein
in
of stuff.
defense of Isabel Allende, she was very important. You know,
Granted, yeah,
I
yeah,
can
no
highlight.
shots, but she's
No.
conventional.
But, you know, Diamela wrote for Chile, for
Yes.
nobody else, and Isabel Allende wrote for California.
Mm.
Yeah. Yep.
And so basically, each of them wrote for the audience uh,
That
they
makes
had in
sense.
mind. Yeah.
You had mentioned two things that you brought up that I'm going to prompt you for. One was the Guarani in the original. So you mentioned in the Spanish edition, there's a lot of Guarani phrases throughout
Mhm.
and sections. And you asked if that was in here. And I, honestly, I don't know how to answer that because I know that there are certain words and there are certain things that are described in the footnotes, but there's not a ton. There's not a ton of stuff. I'm just flipping through and there's like no, that's just the name of a place. That's not even like
Yeah.
necessarily a term, but there's a handful of them. What was that? Yeah, that seems like an interesting strategy for Roa Bastos to be deploying. How talk more about that? Like, was there
You know, in Guarani, Paraguay is one of the most indigenous places in Latin America, besides Central America, countries in Central America and Mexico.
huh?
But Paraguay is super close to Argentina, as you know, and Brazil. In Brazil now, but not nobody, but not many people speak indigenous languages. Not in
Okay.
Chile, not in Uruguay, uh, and in Argentina. They say that they don't have indigenous people when Mapuche people are fighting the government there. And but so in when you talk to a Paraguayan person, anyone, they know how to speak Guarani. In those schools,
Interesting.
they have in their schools they know Guarani and Spanish. Same. It's like Ireland.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
Right.
it's like it's a project, like a national project. Everything is bilingual.
Right.
And at the same time, Robasto was writing this in Spain or publishing this in Spain, talking about a dictatorship when a dictatorship was happening in Paraguay at the same time, Stroessner's dictatorship.
Hmm.
So I believe in some way was a way to talk to the dictator in Guarani. And I don't have my copy here, but it's in Chile. But I believe maybe the things he put in Guarani was aimed to directly to Paraguay because
Interesting.
only a Paraguayan can read Guarani. Well, it might be Guarani speakers in everywhere in the world, but
Right.
if you are speaking in Guarani, is when you go to a family and they start like using their own language or their own like giggling thingy. It's like a family affair, and I find very beautiful. Like when you put some family language in your novels.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think that's very cool. And I think on one of our earlier episodes, we did see that like 80% of people in Paraguay still speak Guarani and
Yeah.
or can, which is remarkable and kind of amazing. Um, it's interesting when you mention that to me that his strategy too as a whole writer is not to give you a lot of like spoon feeding. Like there's not a lot of like, here, I'm going to make this easy for you. So even with that, like incorporating a second language, the
Right.
sort of assumption that like either you'll get it or you won't. It may not be for you, but it's just going to be here. Like
Yeah.
that's great. And it reminds me a bit of your works in which they're entertaining, they fit, they're very smart, they're very political, they're all in there. But you don't always give people like the spoon feeding. You allow them to like figure it out on their own, learn on their own, read it on their own, learn how to read it on their own, and then appreciate it as such rather than,
Yeah.
trying to like, oh, let me coax you in, let me bring you in, let me bring you in. Is that a strategy that you think that you've developed from your reading of other Latin American writers? Is this something that you think about in your work, or is it just a coincidence?
I would say it's a good school. Yeah, reading great Latin American literature is, I think the best works everywhere are that's a personal belief that when a writer thinks that the reader is smarter than the writer, I always say that.
Hmm.
I always believe in my mind the reader is smarter than me.
Hmm.
So it's because in this world sometimes you are talking to somebody and that other person already decoded you.
Yeah.
So I always that maybe that's why I write sometimes so difficult because I always say no, this is too easy. They will know who killed the butler. So let's add four more layers of reality and some dreams so that way, they won't discover the mystery.
I
Yeah, and
get
I think
that.
one thing about the boom writers and the MLLT and also, Isabel Allende is complex because she
Yeah.
doesn't show you what she really wants is talk about sex and love. And the mystery of that is so hard. That's one of the hard mysteries to solve, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's why she's so beloved and so well read. And they're not apologetic, and they never explain.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think it's a good school. It's a good school.
I think so too. It's like it does have a lot more respect for the reader, like you say. Like,
Yes, and also these days everything is like customer driven.
hmm.
Mhm.
These writers, the Latin American writers I used to read in school and throughout my life, they they were writing for grown-ups, for
Yes.
all, not for kids, not for youngsters, not something mixed with like young reading. Let's think about 2025 because their minds are not well developed and they love dragons. I love dragons,
Yeah,
but
nothing, no shots against dragons
no,
also.
no, exactly. I don't want any dragon to be mad at me. Dragons that are hearing, listening. But so these grown-ups were super political. In 70s, writers everywhere they were super political. So they were writing about the things they wanted to just like Isabel Allende in the 90s was writing about grown-ups were about sex.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
You made a connection between I the Supreme and this book, By Night
yeah.
in Chile by Roberto Bolaño. Do you want to explain your idea?
Well, Kaja was telling that she now she needs to read Bolaño. No, you read Bolaño, but by night
Yeah,
in
but I don't think I read this book of Bolaño's, which if this book explains I the Supreme, then 100% I'm going to read By Night in Chile.
I will like it because it's like a brief version, uh,
The summary,
abridged.
abridged.
Uh, because Bolaño is a writer from the 90s and 2000s, a little bit.
Right.
So in those years, writing big novels was not well regarded unless you are already an established writer. And Bolaño did that at the end, right?
Yeah.
2006, 2666.
Yeah.
Um, so they were a little scared of writing like long novels, and Bolaño was a great reader of the boom writers
Yeah.
of the tradition in itself. So of course he read this one. He might
Oh,
have
yeah.
an essay on this or a chronic.
I wonder.
an article. But the thing is, um, in the 90s, there was like a reaction to long political novels. So everybody was
Hmm.
in some way laughing at this kind of stuff because it was well done and ready to be archived. So, but at the same time, the influence, Faulkner is so important for the boom.
Yeah.
And as I lay dying, that was the part, the template for this. It's somebody dying, in an
Mhm.
important figure like a local leader,
Yep.
uh, telling their story in a like free consciousness, modernist way, right?
Yeah. The multiple voices really stands out between like the Faulkner's various speakers and a
Right.
lot of the boom.
So first, I think Carlos Fuentes did La Muerte de Artemio Cruz. I think it was
Yep.
Artemio Cruz dead. It was the
Yeah.
same. It was an old guy dying, talking about his life and family. Then this one, so it became a pattern.
Yeah.
Bolaño, so Bolaño, when he published or wrote By Night in Chile, Nocturno de Chile, instead of choosing the dictatorship or the pater family, the father of of the big family, he decided to do the same with the biggest critic, like reviewer, like literature reviewer in a newspaper in Chile who had a lot of power. That was a real figure. Uh, let's say, I don't know, what's the name of the this lady in the New York
Uh, Michiko Kakutani was the
Tower?
old one. That yeah, yeah.
She's still around? I don't know. Who's
No, she retired, but that's yeah,
the
now it's
Harold Bloom, right? The Harold Bloom,
yep.
but in the newspaper. And this guy was interesting because his name was Alone. That was his name, nom de plume, his like writer's name.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he wrote in the most important conservative newspaper in Chile, El Mercurio, from the whole 20th century. So he was the guy who decided what was good in Chilean literature and in some way in Latin American literature. So Bolaño took this figure of this real guy and he said, I'm gonna tell the story just like in I the Supreme, but this guy, and the guy was a Catholic priest.
Right. Or a Jesuit, right?
Um, uh, alone.
Opus Dei.
Opus Dei, yes. So it's the same, but Bolaño presented it like a different version of the dictator. Is the one who dictates what is good for the literature taste. And it's the same structure. The guy is
That's
dying, he has a fever, and so everything is crazy at the beginning,
hmm.
and then he starts like healing, and at the end uh, starts crazy, and because it's Bolaño in the 90s or 2000, everything ends very well settled and with a good aftertaste.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's interesting. I haven't read this since it came out. It came out in 2000, 2003. The Spanish edition in 2000. That's a long time ago now, but 2003, back to everything's 2003 again. Um,
Yeah.
but I want to reread this because it's been so long, and it was the first book of his that came out, and the first one that I read, and I remember really enjoying it. And the one thing that I remember is the last line, and then the storm of shit begins,
Yeah.
which I think is quoted or is like an epigraph for a lot of other books now. But that was the one that I fixated on because it's like you could say shit storm. We do
I
have
mean, you compare with the Roa Bastos book or Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, and
yeah.
I'm curious. I don't know any women doing this kind of template.
There wasn't anyone that showed up. So there was the article or there was a essay inside of this book about Roa Bastos, or like as a chapter, I believe, in which it was referred to that there was a number of writers, Latin American writers, I believe it was 11, that got together and said, we should each write about the dictator from our country. So you get like Alejo Carpentier, various other people. I don't think a single one of them was a woman that was
No.
referenced in there. I don't think at all.
Love to
Which,
have Clarice Lispector writing about the Brazilian dictatorship, for instance. But
yes.
he dealt with that. She's closer to the Amela in that way. They were more elusive because, for a women under dictatorship was not a game. It was real survival skills. So you could not ever say anything really explicit about dictatorship because they would torture you. They will take you
Mhm.
and torture you. So, but Rabasso was in Madrid or in Barcelona, so he
Was he
could
in
afford.
Barcelona? Okay. For
I
some reason,
think
I
so.
thought he was in Argentina. He's in Argentina
Or
for a
maybe
time
in Buenos
too.
Aires. Yeah,
Yeah, because he can't. He's one of the people that when the new dictatorship, the 60s, he's like it goes in exile immediately and has to
right.
escape the border, I believe. So, but yeah, he was back and forth. He never went to France. He's like one of the few that does not go to France. Who stays
Exactly.
out.
Not to Paris. Yeah.
But you're right. Like the boom authors, the female authors writing at the time during the boom do not get the same
No.
attention by any means, and seem to be up to a slightly different aesthetic project as well. Like I like what you're saying about like in the kind of writing for their space and being more
It has to
elusive
be
in the
more
personality.
abstract for women in
Yeah.
the period of the boom. Or if you see Armonía Summers, for instance,
Oh
the
yeah.
great Uruguayan writer for same period, she was dealing with surrealism, or even the Mexican Elena um, uh, Garro, sorry. They are much more abstract and more like crazy in a
Yeah.
way less historic.
It's very interesting. We need to circle back down and do a bunch of female Latin American writers from this period, not writing about dictators. No more dictators. I
Right.
think,
I mean,
think
I don't think that's a promise we
approach.
can keep on 2 month review.
I need
In
a
the
little
water.
escape. It's in the water. Me-
Home for those writers was the dictatorship. Home, like the house.
yeah, the
And
house. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they were writing about that.
That's yeah. We have a forthcoming book from Sarah Mesa that has not that exactly, but there is like it is all structured around the family, the home, the lies that are told inside the home, the secrets that are not kept, like things like that that are so it is always that it's a good like analogy between the
Yeah,
two.
yeah.
So we didn't talk too much about this. Kaya, what's your necromancy in here? Or your was it
Um,
necrophilia or necromancy? I forget which one.
necromancy,
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 okay.
Oh wow.
That's
necrophilia.
better
I
than
mean,
necrophilia.
yeah, necromancy is frowned upon, but necrophilia is really frowned upon. There, uh, I think that was partially in jest because some of the ways in which I think the Supreme is talking, where he talks about like, oh, when they spoke at my funeral or something something,
Mhm.
and so it refers. I wasn't sure if this is. I think we had talked about it previously that some of it is kind of maybe him talking from the other side, or if he's talking about all of these false funerals as well. And then he does also get back into skulls or like the collecting of skulls or
And
something.
his skull.
And his skull, yeah. There's a lot of beheadings, a lot of decapitations, a lot of skulls.
Yep.
So that's why I mentioned necromancy.
Ah, got you. Yeah, because I circled that specifically. The line that you're referring to is where he says, "Didn't Simon Bolivar threaten to invade Paraguay as Father Perez recalled at my funeral services in order
Yeah.
to liberate his French friend?" And I flagged that as like, oh, that's weird. And that comes right after the other part that you're referring to, where the dictator says, "As for me, I see the past now confused with the future. The false half of my skull kept by my enemies for 30 years in a box of noodles amid the junk piled in an attic." And then there's a compiler's note that says, "As will be seen in the appendix, this prediction of El Supremo's was also fulfilled down to the last detail." So
Wow.
there's a skull. There's also, is there an appendix? I don't think there is. Oh, yeah, there is. There's an appendix. Okay, never mind.
That
That's
goes on with
cool.
the got any terms, right? Oh no, I'm looking at the glossary, sorry.
Yeah,
At the
no, yeah, not there is a glossary, by the way. I did forget about that too, of some of the terms that are within here. So that might be why I'm not clocking it either, because they're just like
Right.
a lot of times they're just incorporated, but they're never so far I haven't had anywhere I was just like, I don't know what they're talking about. Like contextual clues were like strong enough to make it work, which is I think probably the best strategy for a translator. Like if you can include those words but not have to footnote them and people can still understand,
Mhm.
that's pretty golden. But the part that I liked the most out of this section was that beginning part where they're like everyone's there. Echeverria's there from Argentina. They're all gonna have their little discussions, and then the dictator's like, "Oh yeah, we have famous people who have been to Argentina that have done a lot of great things." Where is this page? And he references like a woman's name. And then Echeverria is like, "Oh yeah, I know about that," and tells this like crazy story about like people came to like have a special celebration in her honor as like the Paraguayan living in Argentina. That's great. And they went to the spot where they thought she had lived, and it's just a whore. And then the dictator's like, "Oh boy, this isn't gonna go well for him."
Well, as Kaija was saying, like those guys are 19th century people. That's a good thing about Roa Bastos and many of those guys. They really know how to think about a wild male or somebody from the 19th century. They were crazy. They were romantics in some way. They were all about like cemeteries and graveyards and seeing people as not very like quiet.
Yeah, yeah, it's very direct. Ana Diaz is the name of the person.
And I
Just
mean,
Ana Diaz. They're like, anywhere there's an Ana Diaz, that's a Paraguayan daughter of the earth. And then he just disgraces. There's also I have to give shouts to Francia for being anti-gambling. That's maybe the one of the other
I remember that
funniest
part
parts
also.
of this
Yeah.
whole book is that the Argentines are then like, guess what? We're gonna sell you books. They like take the one printing press and they're like, you need to buy all this. We're gonna make your history. We're gonna print your history. Buy copies of your history from us. And Francia's like, fuck you. I'm not going to do that. We're going to write our own history. I'm going to fill my basement with pages of history. We're going to write more history than you've ever seen, Argentina. And then he's like, but then they started making playing cards. And then everyone started gambling and everyone's losing their money. He's like, I'm going to burn it all down. And I was like, yeah, my friend, like ruin it. No gambling allowed. Get rid of it. I'm
exactly.
not on moral reasons anti-gambling. I'm just sick of people sports gambling and that's all they talk about and don't talk about the sport. They only talk about the gamble. And so I'm on board with this. Get rid of it. Don't allow it. You've got a chance. You're making your country. Don't allow it in.
Oh wow, yes. That's
You could do it.
no, of course because Paraguay was a place of poor people at that moment. So gambling when economics are not well for people, it's a trap,
And
like alcohol, right?
well, exactly. And that's the other way that this gets referenced. The gambling
Yeah,
gets referenced is where they say just tax them. Let them gamble all you want and just have a tax. And then we're going to make so
that's
much
corruption.
money. If
That's
you go
corruption.
tell
Yeah.
people you have to pay a tax, they're not going to want to pay it. But if they're like, oh, I give a little bit when I gamble, they're good with it and you can make a ton of money. And it's like, goddamn grifters right from the jump. 1810, just trying to
And
take
that's
you
why
out big.
that's a reason why these guys always wrote those journals, their own journals, because they wanted the and I think in some way Rabastos it was a sweet revenge from the dictatorship because those guys wanted to keep the record straight. Like I'm a moral person. If I killed somebody, it was for the benefit of our nation and very righteous. And I keep my journal so everybody can go and read what I did all the whole time. So Roa Bastos, as many of these writers, and I hope that somebody does with Trump in the future, like a great writer, like Pynchon writing a dictatorship novel about this guy, would be great. Like they wanted to have the whole of archive, but these guys in the 70s came and said, no, we are gonna rewrite history in the shape of fiction, and anybody can come and decontextualize your life and show how it is. And that's why we were talking about like readership, because what happens when you decontextualize history is fiction.
Yeah. 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 I do like in here too that there isn't the authoritative narrator. That's also a little bit broken. Everything becomes uncertain. Everything are they feel like they're different documents at times, even if like they're not designated as such within the text. You can sort of read them as like a letter versus a journal versus whatever. Like there's different forms. The history versus like his wanting to write a novel is like whatever. But it is that sort of allows you to play with like your ideas about what's going on with it and construct that instead of being told like here's what you should believe. You get to be like, I have mixed feelings about this guy in a way. Like I know he's an awful person. He's going to be much more awful. He's already talking a lot about beheadings, like you say, and torture and whatnot. But like at this moment in time, through these documents that the compiler's giving us as an unreliable narrator, and that Francia himself as being an unreliable narrator, puts you in the spot where you have to make your own judgment. You're not being told exactly.
Yeah. And the supreme thing, right? The title is like the I, like the ego. The ego is not the supreme anymore.
Yeah.
But for those guys, they were the supremes, not anymore.
Yeah, he's that's got to be coming soon. I mean, I don't know where this book ends or goes in terms of its history, but like we're at around 1811, 1812, I think, in terms of like that historical part. And it's 1814 that he takes over as the Supreme Dictator for life. So something's going to happen there. I wouldn't be shocked. I'm probably wrong, but here's a dumb prediction: is that I put out one prediction of how I thought this was going to shift. Maybe this just ends with him being like, I the Supreme. Like that's like the last
Right.
bit is now I've taken it over. Now I've won, and now
I
I've won
remember
forever because
I,
I've
I,
written
was,
the history.
I once spoiled, but I remember the ending is very satisfying.
Okay.
It's unmasterful too. You will
Woo.
know.
I'm excited. I think it's great. I think it's fun. I just wish I had more time and more space to like enjoy it on a richer level. And talking about it each week has made it like more and more and more and more fun. And I really do think it's a great book. Obviously, it's a great book, but I do enjoy reading it too. But it is like of the books we've done recently, this one I feel is more challenging than The Tunnel. Is it's a
Yeah,
little bit
sure.
more there's more going on within the paragraphs in terms that you personally have to parse. Once you have the voice of gas, you have the voice down for The Tunnel.
But
The voice here is
once
not
in a
one.
while, put some dragons there, and think put some dragons in this novel, and think there's this sci-fi or any fantasy thing, and it will be totally fun. Like instead of thinking about Paraguay, think about like a world that was happening, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Put a map, a couple of maps.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the times that I get the most confused, to be completely honest about this, is when it does hit some of the references to the people that I'm like, oh, I know that name came up before, but I don't remember what their like
That's a
role
drop.
is.
That's a
And a
drop,
lot
right?
of their roles are like a little hazy, like the viceroy, or sometimes it's like the emissary from wherever, and some they're just like vague. And then when I hit those names, I'm like, I don't remember who you are, but like I remember you're like a politician of some sorts. That's the part that I get most like in my head about. And when
Right.
I start looking them up and they're real characters from history, that's when I'm just like, okay, now I'm in a new rabbit hole of trying to understand where this is coming from. That's the thing that I think is like on a basic reading level, the thing I struggle with most.
I think that's a problem now because if you imagine reading this in the 90s or in the 70s, there was no
Yeah.
internet. When
Nope.
when I was reading that, internet was starting, so I couldn't afford like having a phone. But right
Mhm.
now, like the attention span, it's like it's an addiction in some way. Like
100%.
imagine like you're reading this for tomorrow's test. So I couldn't stop. I
Yeah.
just like reading because I had to, and maybe tomorrow next day I would go to the library and find an encyclopedia or the history of Paraguay, and I didn't do that. Just forgot. So it was great. Like you couldn't like stop, and well, that's is one of the reasons that maybe it would be like a downtime of internet while you're reading long books, like no internet allowed.
It would be cool if they shut down the internet for like 4 hours a day. Just like
I
for these 4 hours, nobody gets it.
think it's a great idea. I
Yeah.
think, have you been in those coffee shops where
Y-
no laptops? At the
Yeah.
beginning, it's like, oh, let me work. But then you realize like, wow, they're trying to do something with my inner luxury or something like that.
Earlier this week, we're in my publishing class, we're talking about bookstores, and the idea proposed by the students for a bookstore in Rochester was a dispensary bookstore where you wouldn't have Wi-Fi and you would just smoke
Ah,
weed, take gummies, drink a THC drink, and hang out, buy books, and read in a peaceful situation.
but it's a blackout zone. That's the name, right? A blackout zone. No, no internet, no
No
connection.
internet. Yeah, just shut it down. Just you're in a
Wow.
space where like you get to like hang out, get high, and talk about books with whoever's also hanging out, getting high in this bookstore.
You got a gold mine there.
I know, right? Like if there were regulations allowing for this, I think it would happen. But right, I would live there. I would live there. I would be like, this is the best place on earth. Like there's peace, there are good vibes, there's none of the internet, there's no distractions. This is where it is. But alas, but yeah, I do, yeah, shut it down. Shut it down every once in a while. Let's get our attention back. Let's be able to read this book completely without feeling like every 3 pages you need to check your email.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Back in
That's
the day, man. I did one other thing about that in my class today. No one had ever used dial-up. Dial-up internet service never existed for anyone in there, which was a new like, oh yeah, that's right. That's another thing you never would have encountered.
So you play that sound and everyone's like,
Yeah, I said it. I was like, doo 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 doo, which wasn't
yeah.
even a real sound. It was like an invented sound. Like there was
But I
no
remember to
mechanics.
me it was an endorphin like upper.
I was like,
Uh,
we're getting on the highway, the information super highway.
now we are connected, right? It's
It's just
was
there. It's
great.
like water.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, we should probably wrap up and get going. Kaya, do you have a favorite line for this week? I
I
know.
do. It's on page 262 toward the top. And I assume it's Don Amato who's speaking, but he's saying, I have tirelessly interrogated the layers of our planet. I have opened them like the leaves of a book in which the three kingdoms of nature keep their archives. In each one of its pages, each species, before it disappears, has left its trace, its memento. Man himself, the latest arrival, has left proofs of his former existence. And then Excellency says, have you read all those pages, Don Amato? And this is my feeling of the book. Impossible, Excellency. It would take millions of years and we'd still only be at the beginning.
Beautiful.
Yes, I
Yeah.
remember that too.
Encyclopedia, right? Love it.
Oh, so good. I will go with, I don't have anyone marked this time. I do just this one I just have outlined in the middle, and I do think it's kind of funny. Is just we must take care not to fall into the hands of master butchers. It's good advice.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sound.
It's good advice.
That's what we're doing here in Queens now.
Yeah. Stay out of the hands. So, anyways, thank you guys for listening. If you can rate review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you're watching this, wherever you're listening to it, you can subscribe to the 3% Problem Substack for more information about open letter books and things that aren't open letter books. Goes far afield. Talk about other translations from other presses. Talking about this ain't an open letter book. And for next week, we will be covering up to page 326. We have 3 episodes left, but that one 326, and there we go.
That's great.
And Carlos, thank you for joining us. And where can people find you online or not online?
I have my page in Linktree, or just look for me in Open Letter.
Yeah, come to Open Letter website, get all of Carlos's books. Yeah, find support, all that fun stuff. I have a
Thank you,
outgoing
guys.
question for you. Is there an Isabel Allende book that has dragons in it?
Absolutely.